Oh, yeah.
And we are live.
Wow.
All right. Welcome back to the Dangerzone. So quickly, I'm here with my second guest of the day, Paul Brown. He's a Marine and what else? Author and congressional candidate back in 2016 race. And he also happens to be my cousin.
Thanks for having me here, bro.
Yeah, welcome, dude.
Yeah.
So you're an author. You wrote a short book called Total War.
Yeah.
America's
Roadmap to
Victory. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Short book, long essay, somewhere in that range. I wrote it at the end of 2014. A little of my background, I was in the Marine Corps. We were all one big military family. My dad was in the Marine Corps. My brother served in the Marine Corps. A lot of us deployed and everything. And, if any of y'all were watching with Sam on here, we grew up together and we grew up learning about war. And that was our game. It was, what kind of war are we playing today? Jungle warfare, savannah warfare, desert warfare, pirate day warfare, night day warfare, on and on. So we grew up with that ingrained in us, and it was something we really learned a lot about. And then we went off and experienced it, and then it became very real, and it also became not just play but academic. We've all, in our own ways, become students of warfare, and what I saw over the years was just how lacking our method, the United States method for approaching war, has been for a very long time, and that's kind of what Total War captures. It captures the idea that really since World War II, we've been fighting what's known as limited war.
Yeah.
And the difference basically between total war and limited war is in total war you do whatever you have to win, and usually people think of it and it encapsulates even what your economy is doing. During World War II, our entire economy was mobilized to support the war effort. I mean, in the civilian population, there was rationing and there were curfew, lights out. You couldn't just be driving around after 10 p.m. at night because you're using up extra gas and you've got lights on the road. And if a spy plane or bombers, God forbid, came over, it would be easier to find targets.
Yeah.
But what I focus on more is the actual strategy and tactics employed in war. And what we saw starting in the Korean War was a hesitancy. We held back. And it was less so at the tactical level at that point and far more so at the strategic level. We were afraid of China getting involved. So there were geographic areas that we chose not to surpass. That we held back on our aggression. Again, at the tactical level, we weren't seeing a huge difference from the way we'd been fighting in World War II, and that limited us. And the results of the Korean War were essentially a tie.
Yeah. I mean, we're technically in a ceasefire.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. We're technically still at war,
which is
it's
wild.
Crazy. It's crazy. You go to the DMZ, and obviously it's typically pretty peaceful there, but there is a insane history of little flare-ups that have occurred there.
Yeah.
You may have heard of the, I think it was called the Paul Bunyan incident.
Yes. Yeah.
Which
let's talk about
is
that.
mind-blowing. There was this tree that was blocking a South Korean guard post where there were U.S. troops there and South Korean troops, and a small contingent of U.S. troops went down to chop it down. And the DMZ is very heavily regulated. There can only be so many troops there at a time. Only so many of them can be armed in one way or another. And everyone's watching to make sure everyone's playing by the rules. But as is often the case, usually the good guys play by the rules and the bad guys don't. So there was an officer, and I believe it was I can't remember if it was an officer and a couple enlisted men or a couple officers. They were chopping down the tree, and a North Korean officer with a couple of his guys came and they were like, stop. And they just kept on going, just ignore them. They're following the SOP. And then they say again, stop. This was planted by like the deer leader or whatever. By the way, this was back in I think the 1960s or 70s.
So shortly after.
So yeah, it was a while ago. They keep on going, and finally, the officer pulls out an axe and hits the U.S. officer, and the other guys with him come out with axes. They kill him. They like hack him to death. And because of where it wasn't clear that had happened yet to the South Koreans and U.S. troops there that weren't right there with the working party. So it took them a while to figure it out. Finally they send people over there and they see, wow, like this got real. So they get them out of there, and the next day, I believe it was called Operation Paul Bunyan. They send in the South Korean and U.S. combined forces, a convoy of troops armed to the teeth. It's like several platoons worth. They set up security. They had bombers and fighters flying overhead along the border. And South Korean special operations, I can't remember what unit specifically, went over to the bridge between both sides with claymore mines strapped to their chest. Claymore mines, and yelled at the North Koreans to come over, just like taunting them.
Yeah.
Like ready with clackers to push the buttons and just, end it. It was this just
in themselves.
In themselves.
And
yeah,
whoever's in front of them, yeah.
They're just yelling, just blood veins popping and just this palpable anger. And we go and we don't just cut down the tree at the base. Like if this is the tree here, we cut it up 20 feet high.
Yeah.
To leave this like super obvious stump as a sign, like we came over here and when push came to shove, you guys weren't up to it. And they didn't do a thing. They obviously the actions they took before, like we didn't kill any of their guys in retaliation, at least not at that time. But I mean, there were a lot of little events like that have occurred at the DMZ over the years, and most people just aren't aware of it. So anyway, kind of tangent there. In Vietnam, you start to see not only strategic and large-scale geographic shifts from total war to limited war, but you start to see those tactical shifts as well.
Yeah.
You have a much smaller number of troops deployed. You also have a lot more geographic restrictions. The Vietnamese, the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese army used very, very heavily Laos and Cambodia to move troops, to move supplies, to move everything. I mean, they just giant areas. And we decided that was fair game for bombing, but nothing else. We weren't going to go in there and fight them, at least not till the very end of the war. Yeah. And it was too little too late. So
basically going back to the whole holding back.
Yes.
Like we have the ability to stop what's happening and defeat the enemy. I guess that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
We know how to stop it, but for whatever reason we put the political restraints and strategic restraints on ourselves of not doing what's necessary.
Absolutely.
Whereas in World War II, we're pushing through country to country.
Yes. Yes. I mean, look at numbers here. People don't realize this. We mobilized something like 500,000 troops in Operation Desert Storm, and the tiny, short little war that's a blip on a lot of people's radars. 500,000.
Yeah.
That's not including the Allied coalition troops that were with us, roughly another 200,000. At our height in Iraq, since Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003, our height, we had 166,000 troops in country.
Wow.
166. In Afghanistan, at the height of that, we had 100,000 troops.
Yeah.
And you're looking at it 500,000 versus... And even with those 500,000, the results we got were limited. Yes, we won. Clearly, it was a clear tactical and strategic victory over Saddam Hussein. But then we left, and Saddam Hussein was still there.
Yeah.
And so, I'm belaboring the point a little bit, but the result, there's a couple of really, really negative results out of this. We get involved in all these wars that we don't have a clear victory outcome from. I mean, we've got a pretty long track record now going to Korea's a tie, Vietnam's a loss, Somalia, our involvement there, I would call that a loss. Iraq and Afghanistan technically aren't over yet, even though President Obama declared the war in Iraq over in 2011 and the war in Afghanistan over in 2014. We have thousands of boots on the ground in both those locations, as well as in Syria and Libya and Somalia and Nigeria and Yemen. The list goes on. So not only we're not winning these, which is bad for those specific outcomes, it's bad for the amount we've sacrificed and lost on those things. It's also bad for the long-term strategic military viability of our nation, right? If your little whoever, tiny podunk guerrilla group, terrorist group, or military in some part of the world, and you're ready to just go toe-to-toe with the U.S. military, just look at history. Your odds are pretty good. You don't have to be better trained or equipped or anything. You just have to have a will to hold on long-term, the will to do whatever it takes and know that you're going to lose a lot of people, but as long as your people are dedicated to winning, eventually we're going to get tired and leave.
Yeah. I think I saw a lot of that, what you just said, in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
A lot of people, they'd come out and fight. We'd have people are like, hey, I'm willing to fight the Americans, or they get told, hey, go fight the Americans. But strategically, a majority of them were starting to just hold back and play the waiting game.
Yeah.
They're just going to, all right, we'll just wait till you leave. And guess what? I've seen that come to fruition. All the areas we work so hard to take over, time and time again. And Sangin Valley, the whole Helmand River Valley area.
Yep.
The Taliban just took kind of we were handing their ass to them,
Yeah.
killing a bunch of them, and they kind of pulled back. They're like, hey, these guys are pretty fucking serious.
Yeah.
And then as soon as we turned it over to the Afghans, right, because it's all about nation building. It's all about, supporting them, the Afghans, and helping them make a beautiful, peaceful society,
Yeah.
And then the Afghans just abandon their post or get overrun and killed by the Taliban because the Taliban knows they're weak and don't have us with them anymore. And they just take back the same area we worked so hard and lost a lot of American lives and legs and limbs and arms and everything else trying to take. And they just play the waiting game. And they're smart.
Yeah.
And they also study our rules. They know our rules of engagement to the T. And they play they play within our own rule book.
Yeah. Just smart. I mean, a note on that, us doing the nation building while we really haven't technically won the war yet, it's schizophrenic. Yeah. It's like if I go and hold somebody hostage, if I put a gun to their head and I'm yelling at the cops and stuff, because all the cops came, they're pointing their guns at me, but I got the guy because I just robbed the bank. And while I'm holding a gun to this guy's head, I'm also like, hey, man, has anyone talked to you about getting a college education? Or I noticed you could improve your hygiene a little bit. You're trying to build him up.
Yeah.
While you also have a gun pointed to his head. No, that doesn't work. You can't be his friend and be the hostage taker. You got to pick one.
Yeah.
You got to pick one.
Yeah.
And we're trying to have both.
And then on the flip side of that, you have people exploiting it where my second deployment, we were plugged into this village, and one of the village elders was determined to be, he was labeled a village elder in our intel reporting system. And so he was basically protected at that point. But he was known Taliban.
Yeah.
Known. He was the one that was in charge in there. He's an elder too. So he's higher up, and he runs the Taliban in that village. Yeah. And he was coordinating the attacks on us.
Yeah.
The attacks that I got blown up in specifically were under this guy's directives. And guess what? We saw him almost every week.
You're over there talking to him.
Walk into our front door for our weekly meetings with the village, trying to connect with them and everything. It's that whole thing you're talking about.
It's like I said, it's
the guys were fighting. Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's crazy, and this. Everybody knows this. He knows this. He's laughing at us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
all a big joke.
Yeah. And so So there's the obvious downsides that I talk about. We're not winning. It's bad in the moment and it's bad long term. But there's a little bit less obvious downside, and it's a little counterintuitive because you think total war going all the way. You think of it as this like very hawkish, warmongering kind of perspective. But to me, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
If we really approached war the way it was meant to be approached, we would be involved in less wars. When you look at when Vietnam was scheduled to be an 8-week military operation. 8 weeks.
Wow.
I mean, we declared victory in Iraq after what was it, a couple months? I can't remember exactly, but the point is we stopped calling these things wars. We call them military operations. We schedule them out as if the enemy doesn't have a say.
Yep.
And so essentially the requisite sacrifice to win in these conflicts looks a lot lower than it really is on the front end.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, we can do that, no big deal, you know? We're not going to kill very many civilians because it's not total war, it's limited war, and we're not going to have much cost and much losses of our own because again we're doing it like in this very limited capacity.
10-12 years later.
10-12 years later. 15 years. Like, we invaded Iraq in 2003. 14 years later. We had some boots on the ground in Afghanistan in 2001.
Yeah.
It boggles the mind.
Yeah.
Like a few years ago, before I had kids, before Sam had kids, like I remember joking with some of my buddies, like, yeah, our kids are going to be fighting in Iraq too.
But
it's
that's
looking like
happening.
less and less of a joke.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah.
And then that leads to this other just kind of long-term problem. Like, if we as a nation, our government, does not honor the sacrifice of people in the military, people that have done some of the things that we've done, by actually making their sacrifice worthwhile, by putting a strategy in place to win, then people like us are going to quit having their kids join the military.
Yeah.
Instead of it being this like great family tradition, we're like, no, this is what we do, service. But so you'd be like, well, I'm glad about a lot of the lessons I learned in the military and a lot of the experiences I had, but I don't know that it's worth giving up your life for a cause that the people at the top are not dedicated to at all.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to.
There's no focus on maintaining exactly what you talked about. Is this tradition that's been passed down in America of the military families, right?
Yeah.
Where we feel this pride in our heritage of, which I'd like to talk about some more.
Yeah.
But coming from, our fathers both serving and then, having grandparents and stuff like that have served, it's a tradition that's passed on, and we're exactly what you're talking about. Going about it the wrong way is starting to create a break in that American tradition, or just like any, I would say, warrior culture tradition that's passed on from family member to family member.
Yeah.
And what you do is you start losing that like high quality, warrior class.
Oh yeah.
And the warrior class is under attack in America itself.
Yeah.
It's not okay to be an alpha male, or to, be somebody who makes a conscious choice to like, hey, I'm going to go be a warrior,
Yeah.
To like go fight, like making a conscious decision. Like, I'm going to put my life in harm's way. Not even that, but just like have what it takes to go and be prepared to take somebody's life, and have people's lives taken around you.
Yeah.
Most people aren't equipped to deal with that nowadays.
It's not something we can identify with, most Americans.
And the system is like starting to just totally cut our type out. And that's, it's with the whole gender equality stuff, the identifying craziness that's happening in the military, not even just like in society. Like I get it. There's like ebbs and flows of, culture and counterculture, and people care about other people and all that stuff and want them to feel safe and okay with being themselves and all that. But in the military, where we're concerned more about that
Yeah.
than, hey, we might have to shoot people in the face, or
Yeah.
like, I might need what it takes inside of me to like put my buddy back together. You know what I mean?
Yeah. People have started to see the military as not a means for defense of the nation, but as a means for like pushing social values, a means for gainful employment for the masses. It's like all these other things. Military exists because of the nature of mankind, which is that people kill each other, and sometimes they do it on small scale, like you see in cities and in the country, just one-on-one, just crime, and sometimes it happens on a large scale. And if you want to avoid being killed, and on that large scale, you need to organize and mount a defense, and it has to be effective.
Yeah.
And it has to not only be effective, but it has to be cost effective. Because if you use up all your resources doing it, and then you can't afford to do it anymore, then someone's going to come surpass you and beat you up. So you can't be wasting your money on turning it into a social club,
right?
On turning it into like some way to progress some social agenda. It's not that. It just isn't. It is a way. It is a hammer. You use a hammer to drive nails in.
Yeah,
that's it.
Man, do you think that there's? Oh, you know what I was going to say is, I was reading your book, and just reading strictly the definitions of total war, I think helps explain it to people.
Yeah.
It's not, because when you say total war, people are probably thinking like, hey, we're just going out guns a-blazing, like, and dropping bombs everywhere, But literally in the definition from the dictionary, it's really not that bad. It makes total sense.
Yeah.
Like when you read it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It covers like the nation side, like, hey, the civilian side being behind it, supporting it, totally, and having like an endpoint, basically like using the full nation's power to come to an end.
Yeah.
Like to end whatever the conflict is.
Yeah. Here's like a real good analogy I like to use. It's like if you and I decide to fight, right? You've got probably 10, 20 pounds on me. You're in much better shape than me right now. And if it was just straight up you versus me, you probably drive me into the ground.
Yeah.
But if you were like, well, I don't really want to hurt Paul. I mean, yeah, his like fists are bad and his feet are bad if he tries to kick me with those. So I'll hit those, but I'll avoid his neck and his torso and his face, or really any other soft area that could really damage him long term. And I'm not going to use all of my appendages. I'm just going to use one, because if I use too many, it could look bad to the other people around who know I'm stronger.
Yeah.
I would kick your ass. It would be terrible. And that's what America's been doing for the last 75 years.
Yeah.
We've been only trying to block the guy's punches and his kicks and avoiding the soft spots like the neck and the stomach and the eyes.
Yeah.
Going for those eye gouges. And we've been doing it with one hand. And the good thing for us is we're so much bigger than everyone else. We're like the 600-pound man. And we're like 12 feet tall.
Yeah.
And so we come out of all these scrapes alive. But eventually we're going to be smaller. And eventually we're going to meet that other guy who's big. And we're going to try to fight him like that. And we're going to pay for it.
Yeah.
Big time.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what it is.
Like I said, I don't want to be on the receiving end of $400 artillery pieces.
No one does. No one does. No. No,
Ugh,
not
geez.
any artillery pieces, really.
No.
That's not
Not even one.
Yeah, not even
necessarily the case.
Right.
Like war is war. Like we're still killing each other, or trying to kill each other.
Yeah.
The difference is we've gotten a lot better at saving our guys. Even from the Vietnam War. Like we've made some great advances in saving guys on the battlefield.
Yeah.
Getting tourniquets on early and everything like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that makes a huge difference. And it's like, especially when you look at the difference in the death rates and the injury rates in Afghanistan and Iraq, it's huge.
Yeah.
And then you also look at the enemy's death rates, and they haven't gone down very much at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like there are so many different ways to look at warfare and to like focus in and zoom in and all that. And like what I've been trying to do for the last couple of years is sort of zoom out and like what is the big picture? What can we be doing differently? That was one of the reasons I ran for Congress. You know, I would say no, I wouldn't just say I did have what I would call a very easy deployment.
Yeah.
But I know guys like you and Sam didn't, and there are guys worse off. You know, plenty of guys died, plenty of guys lost limbs. You know, we've got guys that lost all 4 limbs, have lost their sight, and my thought was like, if they can give all of that, like the very least I can do is try to run for office to try to do something about it.
Yeah. Or the least our Congress could do
Yeah.
is actually approve it.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
Like actually have some skin in the game.
Yeah. Either they need to officially approve it or officially denounce it.
Exactly.
There needs to be a
but
vote.
make a decision.
Make a
and
decision.
own it.
Yeah, and that's the problem. That we haven't. First of all, we haven't declared war since World War II.
Yeah.
But the most recent authorization for use of military force was in 2002.
Yeah.
That was the Iraq authorization. The 2001 authorization is what authorized us to go out against Al Qaeda and affiliates in Afghanistan. But we've been expanding into all these different conflicts to Libya and to Syria and so on. And it's just like I talked to people in Congress about this. I traveled up to D.C. to meet them and say like, hey, let's get some movement on this. And they didn't want to touch it. They're like, well, you know, we know that there probably should be a new authorization for use of military force, but what the White House is arguing is that the 2001 authorization is blah, blah, blah. Like, it's just nonsense. And they knew that it was more political exposure to take a stand one way or the other. They could just get away scot-free with saying, well, it wasn't my fault, it wasn't my idea, it wasn't my plan.
Yeah.
It wasn't me.
It's sickening. But however, here's something interesting. Sam just told me that Trump's getting ready to meet with all the Senate.
I saw that.
About North Korea, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a step in the right direction.
That's huge. I mean,
for accountability, at least. At least he's saying like, "Hey, I'm not out here on my own.
Yeah,
I'm going to bring everybody else," and kind of like force responsibility for everybody that's been trying to dodge it.
If we're gonna move on North Korea, there has got to be very substantive action from Congress.
Yeah,
there's got to be, and if the president wants to move on North Korea and Congress thinks he shouldn't, they need to make that very clear.
Yeah.
They got to take responsibility. You know, whether or not, one could argue all day about whether or not it is a good idea to do anything against North Korea right now. And there's a million different reasons you can throw out one way or the other. But at the end of the day, whatever we do, we need to take ownership.
Yeah.
Because if we don't, we're going to just end up in another 10, 15, 20, 30-year conflict where we're just messing around and guys come back messed up for years, and we don't actually win.
That's what concerns me about it.
Yeah.
I like to see steps like this, like bringing in the Senate, you know, and stuff like that. I think it's necessary, and obviously things can't change in like 1 second from the failures we've been doing over the past, 20, 30, 40 years or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think it's scary to think that we are about to be fully engaged with North Korea, possibly. And we're also in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan still, which we're planning on retaking some of the areas that I was in the Helmand.
Yeah.
Again.
Which is...
And the Southeast Asia. Like,
yeah.
That's a lot of dispute going on there.
Like World War III, when's World War III going to happen? You could argue we're in it.
Yeah.
It's just a very low-grade, kind of like, it's like a low-grade fever. It's not this high-pitched thing, but what it makes me is it makes me sad. Because I just don't want any more people to die in these conflicts for no reason.
Yeah.
Just, And it gets kind of cliche. We kick a dead horse, but we gotta commit.
And it's hard to get that perspective, for me at least, when I was in the military.
Oh yeah.
And because it was all about you're training and you're doing everything for like the fight, right? So I'm going in to win and do the best job possible that I can at the mission I've been given.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's hard when you're in that grind of like getting ready for your next deployment, training up and everything. And that's what your focus is on. It's hard it's almost like you can't allow yourself to start thinking, hey, maybe we shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
Like as a nation, more like from that level. When you're in it, you have to just be committed.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, you are. You're committed with your life. Yeah. Your life is on the line.
And so it makes sense that like guys would be excited. Like I wanted when I was in, I wanted to go to war with North Korea. I was like, this is the ultimate fight. Like,
yeah.
I could parachute in and be like skiing in the mountains in North Korea and do like ski shooting,
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah. Like,
and be reporting like, like the guys in World War II that dropped in behind enemy lines. Like, there's some cool stories about like the Scandinavian version of like the OSS guys like jumping in, like skiing behind enemy lines where the Germans had invaded up there. And they're like just them in a radio, and they're like reporting to ships, like sending information on.
I'm pretty sure that's who James Bond is based off of, is like Scandinavian guys.
Oh, you know what? That's how I know about that. It's the book Kon-Tiki. Have you read that? It's a story about the guys who they had a theory that the Polynesian islands were populated by people from South America, and they made a journey story. I highly recommend you read that book. I read the book to Christina.
Kon-Tiki?
It was like a nighttime story time. And my father read it to us when we were growing up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But great story just about like perseverance and like how they survived the whole trip over there and they made it.
Yeah.
And like it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Sounds really cool.
But yeah, they were those guys that just like, that's what I would want to do when I was in. But once you get out, you start getting that perspective. It's like, okay, let's think about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's think about
going
to like war with North Korea while we're in Syria, and you see guys getting wounded and dying still in Afghanistan. Like,
yeah, it's like all's quiet on the Western Front.
And then you also see the political side a lot more.
Yeah,
you see the lack of skin in the game from the politicians.
Oh yeah.
And it's very frustrating.
Extremely, extremely so. I mean, even and like, I don't want to call him out too harshly because it is what it is. But there are plenty of even veterans in Congress that I do not approve of the way they have been handling in this. Like, they need to be leading the charge to say, no, we need to take a stand for this. The buck stops here.
Well, I'll say John McCain, I can't stand right now.
Yeah. God bless him. And he was a POW and he served very honorably. And it's almost like you have to say all that.
Yeah.
But the dude is an awful, awful legislator.
I can say he doesn't speak for all veterans.
He doesn't.
For sure.
No one, and no one does.
Yeah.
That's
no
the
one
truth.
does, yeah.
But especially not John McCain.
Yeah.
Yeah. No one does. But John McCain, he's disappointing.
Yeah.
The way he's pushed us into getting involved with the Syrian rebels.
Oh yeah. I mean, real great idea. Solid plan here.
Syria. I mean, we could talk all day about Syria alone. I mean, you've got bad guys on this side and bad guys on that side. Which one do you want to support? Oh, neither. That's the one I want to support. Neither, because they're all bad guys.
Yeah.
They're let's do like we do with most of the other worlds where everyone are bad guys and just stay out of it. Let them figure it out. And it's become so politicized. Whether you get involved or not, do you take the refugees or not, and on and on and on. Well, at the end of the day, we have no obligation to get involved.
Yeah.
We've seen that when we just get involved willy-nilly with these things, it doesn't get made better. And then what's the standard? Just because, is our standard now anytime we see anything going bad, we get involved? What about in Darfur? What about in the Central African Republic?
Yeah.
What about in the
South
Democratic
America.
Republic of the Congo? Or in a number of places in South America, the recent genocide in Nepal,
Mexico,
cartels. Why don't we just go everywhere and bomb everyone? That'll make everything better, right?
Yeah.
And it's like that's kind of the logical path you have to follow if you go with this idea that we're somehow the moral police of the world.
Yeah.
We're not.
And besides the fact, I mean, that's what frustrates me so much is just how quickly people are beating the war drums over, seeing some video of some people dying.
Yeah.
It's like, guess what? People fucking die in this world
All the time.
All the time from horrific
Constantly.
stuff.
Constantly. A tree, dude, could
Yeah.
fall down on this room and kill us both. War on trees.
But I'm saying, like, how about all the human trafficking
Yeah.
that's going on in America?
Yeah.
Like, lives are ruined, kids killed. Like,
Yeah.
let's put some spotlight on that. Let's take care of some stuff in America. And everybody's like, oh, that's like, what is the new term? Nationalism. Like, what? Oh, you just care about America?
Yeah.
Like, no, but I care about people, but we're not helping our own people.
When it comes
Like,
to deciding what our government does,
Yeah.
our government is responsible for the people of America.
Yeah.
And every government is responsible for their own people. There's nothing wrong with helping people outside of America, but as
No.
far as what a government is responsible to do, that is the main focus. That is the
Yeah.
purpose of the organization we call the government. If you here's the thing, I've got nothing. I don't disagree with helping anyone anywhere. If you want to help a family from Syria, invite a family from Syria to come live with you.
Yeah.
I'm not, and I don't say that in like a sarcastic or mean way. I mean it. Like that's probably a good way to help them.
Yeah.
Or send them a bunch of money.
Or go move over there.
Or go move there and make Syria a better place.
Yeah. But God forbid you like make the decision to send my brothers there.
Yeah.
With no clear mission.
Yeah. Or just tell the
And,
government just
like,
fix it like this.
Hey, we're working with both sides, and we're also like kind of stepping on Russia's toes at the same time, and we're not clear. But we're also going to send you into North Korea, so also be ready for North Korea.
Yeah. Also,
And hey, go back into Afghanistan and take that area that you took 3 times before.
Yeah.
While you're at it.
And let's go ahead and ramp up the tempo in Iraq, and we got Libya, Nigeria, and Somalia, and we're still trying to chase down Joseph Kony in Uganda. Do you remember that? Kony 2012 or whatever it was. Joseph Kony. He's the head of the Lord's Resistance Army.
Oh, not Boko Haram, is it?
Boko Haram's Nigeria.
Yeah.
Kony, it was it's funny, not funny, but funny. There's this guy, and I want to say it was 2012, who created this video that went like totally viral. He's like, we need to draw attention to this guy Joseph Kony, who is like recruiting child soldiers in Uganda, in the jungles of Uganda. Legitimately bad dude for sure, just as bad as any other like random warlord in Central
Anywhere
African
in the world.
Anywhere in the world, Central. And the funny thing is, he got the attention. And we deployed a bunch of SF and MARSOC guys to like chase him around the jungle. And because of the changing dynamics of everything everywhere, by the time they were involved there, the Lord's Resistance Army, as it's called, wasn't even like the main threat anymore. But we still had all these special operators on the ground spending all this money and time chasing him. I think we might still.
By the way, Africa is a logistical nightmare.
Yeah.
Coming from like being a medic,
Yeah.
you're looking at the chances of go check it out. Maybe sometime, but
And if you go to North Africa,
not a really place I want to be deployed for an extended period of time.
if you go to North Africa, like say like Benghazi, Libya,
Yeah.
just make sure that people like Obama and Susan Rice and Hillary Clinton are in charge, because you're gonna get attacked, and they're just gonna like sit there and watch while your compound gets burned down, and your ambassador gets killed.
That's so frustrating on so many levels. And you see it. It's a sickness. It's a disease within the bureaucrats that have infested the State Department and our own military.
Yeah.
Like you see it in Afghanistan and Iraq, everywhere, where people are watching with drones overhead and they see you getting fucked up in a fight and they have the tools to help you and they don't.
Yeah. Or ultimately, I'm not going to blame like the drone technician guy, but he doesn't have authorization. He's like, I'm ready to end these dudes.
No, I'm talking about the command that's watching the same feed that the pilot, whatever. Like, no, I'm talking about the decision makers.
Yeah.
Who can make a decision to help you out in a bad situation where, hey, guess what? Guys are going to be dying, but they almost need somebody to die first.
They're like,
before they do something.
Are we 200% sure there are no civilians within 2 miles?
Yeah.
Like, no.
And that started to bleed down even to the team level. We'd start get guys that are really worried about stuff that didn't even make sense.
Yeah.
There was a guy that said, well, should we be shooting at that known Taliban point because they might bring up a busload of children? What? What in the hell are you talking about? And it's that sickness that's just like filtered down, you know?
And you know what's
it's
terrible?
Just like, oh, we can't do anything because what if? Like,
besides, like, it's obviously terrible, but on the other hand, I can't even blame them for thinking like that because of all the guys that have gotten literally put in prison.
Yeah, literally.
Because they made decisions on the ground to fight a war that they got sent to. Like, I understand there's some stuff that some guys have done that's pretty messed up, and I'm not talking about those guys. I'm talking about the guys that have, like, seen someone and reasonably believed that they were an insurgent and ordered the troops to shoot at them, and then those guys ended up in prison. That is unacceptable.
That's fucked.
Or the Marines that pissed on those Taliban bodies.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm smart enough that I'm not going to do it, or I'm at least not going to do it with a camera rolling, but I'm definitely not going to jam up some guys who are just mad because these are the guys that killed their buddies.
Yeah.
And the idea, logically, that it's somehow worse to piss on a dead body, which, again, I'm not defending, but worse to do that than to kill somebody, to take a life, that's backwards thinking.
Yeah.
You can't put someone in there, tell them to be a killer, an aggressive killer, and just turn it off and on like a light switch.
I think that's the gross misunderstanding of what it takes. And we talked about that kind of in the beginning of the podcast where